After the wedding reception had finally ended, and the last bottle of champagne had been drained, my son-in-law showed up at my front door with a notary and a smile that looked like a crack in a windshield. "We just sold this house, Gus," he said, throwing a heavy file onto my kitchen table. "You are moving to a facility for the elderly today. The van is outside." I looked at him, then at my crying daughter, and finally at the sweaty man holding a stamp. I took a slow sip of my black coffee and said, "Great, let's go to the police station first, because the fraud unit is very interested in the recording I sent them of you forging my signature last night. My name is Augustus Wainwright, but everyone calls me Gus. I am 72 years old, and to the outside world, I am just a retired widower living in a Chicago suburb, rattling around in a house that is too big for him. I wear cardigans, I drive a 10-year-old Buick, and I spend my mornings reading the newspaper with a magnifying glass. People look at me and see a relic. They see someone slow, someone whose time has passed, someone who is easy to push around. What they do not see is the man I used to be. For 30 years, I was a forensic accountant for the federal government. I did not just look at numbers, I looked for lies. I hunted down embezzlers, money launderers, and corporate fraudsters who thought they were smarter than the system. I learned to read a balance sheet like a crime scene, and I learned that the most dangerous criminals are not the ones with guns, but the ones with pens and expensive suits. And standing in my kitchen on a Sunday morning was the most amateur criminal I had ever met. Bradley Thorne. My son-in-law of less than 24 hours. He was wearing the same tuxedo he had worn to the wedding yesterday, but now the bow tie was undone and hanging around his neck like a dead snake. He smelled of stale alcohol and desperate ambition. Next to him stood my daughter Beatrice. My poor, sweet Beatrice. She was weeping silently, clutching a designer handbag that I knew was a fake, just like her husband. She could not look me in the eye. And hovering near the door was a short, balding man, clutching a briefcase to his chest like a shield. This had to be Pib, the notary Bradley had dragged out of bed on a Sunday. Bradley did not wait for an invitation. He walked around my kitchen, opening cabinets and slamming them shut as if he already owned the place. He looked at the granite countertops and the Viking range with greedy eyes. I knew what he was seeing. He was not seeing a home. He was seeing equity. He was seeing $2.5 million of prime real estate that he could liquidate to pay off his gambling debts. "Morning, Gus," Bradley said, his voice loud and grating in the quiet morning air. "I hope you are packed." I did not stand up. I stayed seated at the breakfast nook my late wife Catherine had designed 20 years ago. I kept my hands wrapped around my mug. The warmth was grounding. "Packed for what, Bradley?" I asked, my voice calm and level. "For your new life," he said with a sneer. "Sunny Meadows. It is a top-tier facility, Gus. We got you a great room. View of the parking lot. But hey, at your age, you cannot be choosy." Beatrice let out a sob. "Bradley, stop it," she whispered. "You promised you would be nice." "I am being nice, babe," Bradley snapped at her. "Nice is finding him a place to live instead of kicking him out on the street, which is what I should do after how rude he was to my investors at the wedding." I looked at Beatrice. She was trembling. She looked exhausted, her makeup from the day before smeared under her eyes. She was 32 years old, but in that moment, she looked like a scared child. She had always been soft-hearted, always looking for someone to lead her. After Catherine died, I tried to be strong for her, but I think I just spoiled her. I shielded her from the harshness of the world, and in doing so, I made her the perfect victim for a predator like Bradley. I turned my gaze back to Bradley. He pulled a chair out and straddled it backwards, trying to look dominant. He slid the file across the table until it hit my coffee mug with a clink. "Sign it, Gus. It is a power of attorney. It gives me full control over your assets, your medical decisions, and your estate. It effectively says you are too old and senile to manage your own life, so I will do it for you." I looked down at the document. It was thick, legal-sized paper. The language was standard boilerplate legal jargon, but the intent was malicious. It was a license to steal. I flipped to the last page. There was a signature line with my name typed underneath it, and next to it, a signature that looked remarkably like mine already scrawled in blue ink. "You already signed it," I said, looking up at him. Bradley shrugged. "I was just practicing, but Pib here needs to witness you acknowledging it, or at least witness you not denying it. Right, Pib?" The notary wiped sweat from his forehead. "Mr. Thorne, legally, he has to sign it in my presence or acknowledge the signature is his." "Just stamp the damn thing, Pib," Bradley growled. I leaned back in my chair. The adrenaline was starting to pump through my veins. It was a familiar feeling, the same feeling I used to get before a raid. "You are in a rush, Bradley," I said. "Is it the bookies? Or is it the investors from that Ponzi scheme you call a real estate fund? I heard the deadline is tomorrow." Bradley's face turned a shade of red that matched the brickwork outside. He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "Shut up, old man. You do not know what you are talking about. You are confused. That is why we are doing this. You are losing it. Beatrice told me you forget where you put your keys. You forget names. It is dementia, Gus. We are doing this for your own safety." I looked at Beatrice. "Is that what you think, honey? That I am losing my mind?" Beatrice looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, Bradley says the market is crashing. He says if we do not sell the house now, we will lose everything. He says he can invest the money and take care of you. He says it is the only way to save the family." Gaslighting. It was a textbook case. He had isolated her, made her doubt her own reality, and now he was using her fear to get to me. I reached into the pocket of my robe and pulled out my smartphone. It was a modern model, not the flip phone I pretended to use when they were around. I unlocked it and tapped the screen. "I am not senile, Beatrice," I said softly. "And I am not broke. But your husband is." I pressed play. The sound that came out of the phone speaker was crystal clear. It was the sound of clinking glasses followed by Bradley's voice. It was recorded just 10 hours ago in the bridal suite of the hotel, while Beatrice was likely asleep or crying in the bathroom. "I am telling you, Candace, he is a vegetable. The old coot does not even know what day it is. I practiced his signature 100 times. Look at this. Perfect, right? Once I get the house, I can pay off the Russians and we take the rest to Cabo. Beatrice, please. She will do whatever I say. She is pathetic." The recording stopped. The silence in the kitchen was heavier than lead. Beatrice stopped crying. She stared at the phone, her mouth slightly open. The notary Pib looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floorboards. Bradley stared at the phone. His eyes were wide, not with shame, but with a pure, cold rage. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. "I have my ways," I said. "I told you, Bradley. I used to catch people smarter than you for a living. You think because I walk with a cane that I am deaf and blind. I installed the listening app on your phone 3 weeks ago, when you asked me to fix your Wi-Fi. You are not just a thief. You are a cliché." Beatrice looked at her husband. "The Russians, Cabo Candace." "Who is Candace?" Bradley ignored her. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He loomed over me, casting a shadow across the table. "Give me the phone." "No," I said. "This recording is already in a cloud server, and I just emailed a copy to my lawyer Sullivan. You remember Sullivan, right? The former federal prosecutor. He is meeting with the district attorney tomorrow morning." Bradley's face twisted. He lunged. It happened faster than I expected. For a man who had been drinking all night, he was fast. He grabbed my wrist with a grip that bruised. I tried to pull back, but I am 72 and he is 32 and full of steroid-induced strength. He wrenched the phone from my hand. "No," Beatrice screamed. Bradley did not hesitate. He threw my phone against the granite backsplash. It shattered with a sickening crunch. Glass and plastic sprayed across the counter, landing in the fruit bowl. There, Bradley panted, his chest heaving. No more recording. No more email. He looked at me, and for the first time I felt a flicker of genuine fear. Not for my money, but for my life. He had crossed a line. Violence was now on the table. "You think that matters?" I asked, my voice remaining steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "The police will trace the digital footprint." "Police?" Bradley laughed. A high, manic sound. "Who are they going to believe, Gus? A grieving daughter and her successful husband, or a senile old man who hallucinates conspiracies?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out another document. He threw it on top of the power of attorney. "Read it." I looked at the paper. It was a medical evaluation. It was on the letterhead of a Dr. Vane. I knew the name. Vane ran a pill mill on the South Side. He would sign anything for $500. The report stated that Augustus Wainwright suffered from advanced paranoid schizophrenia and rapid onset dementia. It claimed I was a danger to myself and others. It recommended immediate institutionalization. The date on the report was from 2 days ago, a day I had spent gardening in full view of my neighbors. "This is fake," I said. "I have never met Dr. Vane." "Does not matter," Bradley said, grinning. "It is signed. It is notarized. It is legal. As far as the state of Illinois is concerned, you are crazy, Gus. Anything you say about me, delusions. Any recordings fabricated by a sick mind." He leaned in close, his face inches from mine. I could smell the coffee and whiskey on his breath. "You have two choices, old man. You sign the power of attorney voluntarily, and we put you in a nice home. Semi-private room Jello on Tuesdays. Or I use this medical order to have you committed to the state ward. And trust me, you do not want to go there. They tie you to the bed and feed you through a tube." He handed me a pen. "Sign." I looked at Beatrice. She was staring at the medical report. She was reading the lies about her father, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to believe I was sick. Because if I was sick, then her husband was not a monster. If I was sick, then the recording was a hallucination. If I was sick, then she did not have to face the reality that she had married a man who wanted to rob her blind. "Dad," she whispered. Maybe you should just sign. Bradley says he can handle everything. You have been forgetting things lately. Remember, you lost your glasses last week. I had not lost them. Bradley had hidden them. I knew that now. "Beatrice," I said, my voice hardening. "Look at me. Do you really believe I am crazy, or is it just easier for you than admitting you made a mistake?" She looked away. Bradley grabbed my collar and yanked me forward. "Stop talking to her. She is not part of this negotiation. This is between you and me. Sign the paper, Gus, or I swear to God I will drag you out of here myself." The physical threat was real. I could see the vein pulsing in his neck. He was desperate. He owed money to bad people, and I was his piggy bank. If I refused, he might actually hurt me right here in the kitchen. And if he hurt me, he would claim I attacked him in a fit of dementia. It was the perfect trap. I needed time. I needed to get away from him to access my backup systems. I needed to get to my study upstairs, where I had things he did not know about. I let out a gasp. I clutched my chest. It was a performance, but at my age the chest pain was never entirely fake. My heart," I stammered. I slumped forward in the chair, letting the pen drop from my hand. "Dad." Beatrice screamed. She rushed forward, pushing Bradley aside. "He is having a heart attack! All 911! Bradley grabbed her arm and yanked her back. "Do not call anyone!" "What is wrong with you? He is dying!" Beatrice yelled, struggling against him. "He is faking it!" Bradley shouted. "Look at him! He is playing you, Beatrice. Just like he always does, I let my breathing turn ragged. I slid sideways in the chair, looking as frail as possible. Water, I rasped. Beatrice broke free and ran to the sink. She filled a glass with trembling hands. Bradley stood there watching me with cold calculation. He did not care if I died. In fact, it would be easier for him if I did. But he needed the signature first. A dead man cannot sign a power of attorney, and probate court takes too long. He needed control of the assets today. Give him the water, he snapped at Pib, who was cowering by the refrigerator. Beatrice brought the glass to my lips. I drank, spilling some on my chin on purpose. I need to lie down, I whispered. My pills, upstairs. Bradley looked at the stairs, then back at me. He was weighing his options. Fine, he said. Go get your pills, but then you come back down here and you sign. Or so help me God, I will have the orderlies here in an hour to strap you down. I nodded weakly. I leaned on Beatrice as I stood up. My legs felt heavy, not entirely from acting. The stress was taking a toll. Help him up, Bradley ordered Beatrice. But do not let him lock the door. If he tries anything, call me. I leaned my weight on my daughter as we walked out of the kitchen. I could feel her shaking. I am sorry, Dad, she whispered as we reached the landing. He is under a lot of pressure. He loves us, really. He just wants to save the house. I looked at her, at the delusion that was keeping her sane. I realized then that I could not save her with words. I had to show her. I had to let the house of cards fall so she could see who was standing in the rubble. It is okay, sweetie, I said, my voice sounding stronger now that we were out of Bradley earshot. Just get me to my room. We reached the top of the stairs. My bedroom was at the end of the hall, but the study was the first door on the right. I need to go in there first, I said, pointing to the study. My emergency nitroglycerin is in the desk. Beatrice hesitated. Bradley said the bedroom. Do you want me to die, Beatrice? I asked. She opened the study door. I walked in, and for the first time that morning I felt a surge of power. This room was my sanctuary. It was lined with mahogany bookshelves filled with legal texts and accounting journals. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. And unlike the rest of the house, which Bradley had invaded, this room was still mine. I sat in the leather chair behind the heavy oak desk. I opened the top drawer. There was no nitroglycerin there. I did not have a heart condition. What was in the drawer was a prepaid burner phone, a Glock 19 with a full magazine, and a USB drive containing the backup of every file I had on Bradley Thorne. I looked at Beatrice, who was hovering by the door. Close the door, honey, I said. Dad, Bradley said. Close the door, I repeated, my voice dropping the facade of the frail old man. And lock it. Beatrice looked at me. She saw something in my face that she had not seen in years. She saw her father, the man who used to put bad guys in prison. Slowly, she closed the door and turned the lock. What are you doing, Dad? She whispered. I picked up the burner phone. I am declaring war, Beatrice. I did not call the police immediately. The police take time. They need statements, warrants, probable cause. Bradley had a fake medical report and a notary. By the time the police sorted it out, I could be in a psych ward. No, I needed something faster. I dialed Sullivan, my old partner. Sullivan, I said when he picked up. It is Gus. Code Black. There was a pause on the line. Then Sullivan's voice, gravelly and calm. Where are you? Home. Hostile in the perimeter. He has a notary and a fake 5150. He smashed my primary comms. Is Beatrice there? She is here. She is compromised. Understood, Sullivan said. I am mobilizing. Give me 20 minutes. Do not sign anything. I hung up. I looked at Beatrice. She was staring at the gun on the desk. Dad, why do you have a gun? Because your husband is desperate, I said, and desperate men do dangerous things. Downstairs, I heard a crash, then Bradley's voice booming up the stairs. Gus, what is taking so long? I looked at the heavy oak door. It would hold for a while, but not forever. I turned on my desktop computer. I had to disable the security cameras I had installed inside the house before Bradley realized they were there. I did not want him to know I had footage of his little party last night. Not yet. That was my ace in the hole. Beatrice, I said, typing furiously. In about 5 minutes, your husband is going to come up here and try to break that door down. I need you to make a choice. You can stand there and cry, or you can help me move this bookshelf in front of the door. Beatrice looked at the door, then at me. He forged your signature, she asked, her voice small. Yes. And the recording, the woman. It is real, B. She let out a shuddering breath. Then she walked over to the bookshelf. Tell me what to do. It was the first crack in the dam, but I knew Bradley was just getting started. He had not played his trump card yet, and neither had I. Downstairs, I heard footsteps coming up. Heavy, angry footsteps. Open the door, Gus, Bradley yelled. I looked at the screen. The file transfer was complete. I had sent everything to Sullivan. Now we just had to survive until the cavalry arrived. Or so I thought. Suddenly the house went dark. The computer screen went black. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs stopped. He cut the power, Beatrice whispered. Smart, I muttered. Then the doorknob jiggled, violent and loud. I know you are in there, Bradley screamed, and I know you have Beatrice. You are confusing her. You are kidnapping her. Pib, write this down. He is holding her hostage. He kicked the door. The wood groaned. I stood up and picked up the gun. I checked the chamber. Dad, Beatrice said, her eyes wide with terror. You are not going to... I am not going to shoot him, I said calmly, unless he comes through that door with a weapon. But we need to be ready. I moved to the window. I pulled back the curtain. Outside, a white van had pulled into the driveway. It had the logo Sunny Meadows Care Facility on the side. 2 large men in white uniforms were getting out. He brought the goons, I said. This was not just a legal threat anymore. This was an extraction team. Bradley was going to have me forcibly removed. I looked around the study. I had water. I had a weapon. I had evidence. But I was trapped on the 2nd floor of my own house with a daughter who was on the verge of a breakdown and a son-in-law who had just escalated the situation from fraud to kidnapping. I looked at the bookshelf we had pushed against the door. It shuddered as Bradley threw his shoulder against it. Open up! The orderlies are here! They have sedatives. Gus, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, I looked at Beatrice. Honey, I said, go into the closet, put your hands over your ears. No, she said. Her voice was shaking, but she stood her ground. No. I am staying. I nodded. Good girl. I sat back in my chair and waited. I had faced cartel bosses and corrupt senators. I was not going to let a failed real estate broker take my house. But then I smelled it. Smoke. I sniffed the air. It was coming from under the door, acrid and sharp. He is burning us out, Beatrice screamed. I moved to the door. No, it was not fire. It was something else. I knelt down and sniffed. Chemicals. Ammonia and bleach. He is mixing cleaning supplies, I realized. He is trying to gas us out. Smart. Stupid, but smart. He was creating chloramine gas. It would irritate our lungs and force us to open the door or the window. And if we opened the window, the orderlies would be waiting with a ladder. Grab a towel, I ordered Beatrice. Wet it in the attached bathroom sink. Cover your face. She ran to the bathroom. I grabbed a rug and shoved it into the gap under the door. "Bradley," I shouted, "you are creating toxic gas. You are going to kill your wife. I do not care," he screamed back. "She is siding with you. She is just as crazy as you are." That was it. The moment he admitted he did not care about Beatrice was the moment he lost her forever. I saw it in her eyes as she came back with the wet towels. The love, the hope, the denial, it all vanished, replaced by a cold, hard realization. "He tried to kill me," she whispered through the towel. "Yes," I said, "and now I am going to destroy him." I grabbed the burner phone again. I texted Sullivan. "Chemical attack. Gas. Escalation. Bring SWAT." I hit send. Then I sat back in my chair, held the wet towel to my face, and prepared for the siege. Bradley Thorne wanted a fight. He had no idea what he had just started. He thought he was trapping an old man in a room. But he was actually locking himself in a cage with a tiger, and he had just thrown away the key. The door shuddered again. "Come on out, Gus. Take your medicine." I checked my watch. 18 minutes. "I can hold my breath for a long time, Bradley," I whispered to myself. "Can you?" The war for my house had begun. But the war for my daughter life was already won. Now I just had to make sure we lived long enough to enjoy the victory. They say that possession is 9/10 of the law, and for the last 14 days Bradley Thorne has possessed my house, my life, and my dignity. The police had come and gone that first night, but the forged medical order and the power of attorney created a legal gray area that not even Sullivan could cut through immediately. Until a judge reviewed the case, I was stuck in a civil dispute, and Bradley was the squatter who held the keys. He called it a transition period. I called it a prison sentence served in the home I had paid for with 30 years of chasing bad guys. For 2 weeks, I have become a ghost in my own hallways. Bradley moved his operation into the dining room, turning the mahogany table where Catherine and I used to host Thanksgiving dinners into a command center for his fraud. He set up 3 monitors, a high-speed server, and a whiteboard covered in names and dollar signs. He struts around the house in his socks, barking into a headset, selling non-existent real estate opportunities to retirees in Florida, while I shuffle past him in my slippers trying to make myself as small as possible. He thinks he has broken me. He thinks the old man trembling with a cane is harmless. He has no idea that the trembling is a performance, and my silence is not submission, it is data collection. The humiliation is calculated. It is a daily audit of my patience. This morning started like the last 13. I was in the laundry room scrubbing a red wine stain out of Bradley's white dress shirt. He does not use the washing machine for his expensive clothes. He insists on hand washing. He stood in the doorway eating a bagel with cream cheese while I worked my hands raw in the cold water. "You missed a spot, Gus," he said, pointing a crumb-covered finger at the collar. "You know, if you put half the effort into cleaning that you did into making up conspiracy theories, maybe you would be useful." I did not look up. I let my hand shake violently, splashing water onto the floor. I let my head hang low. "I am sorry, Bradley," I mumbled, my voice cracking. "My eyes, not what they used to be." He laughed. A short bark of a laugh. "Yeah, well, try harder. I have a meeting with a whale at noon. I need to look sharp. And do not touch the bagel. That is for people who contribute to this household. There is some tuna salad left over from Tuesday in the fridge, if you can get it open." He walked away, whistling. I waited until his footsteps faded down the hall before I stopped shaking. I looked at the shirt in the sink. I wanted to wring his neck instead of the fabric, but discipline is a muscle I have been training for decades. I finished the shirt. I hung it up. And then I went to the kitchen. The refrigerator now has a padlock on it, a heavy combination lock drilled right into the stainless steel. Bradley said it was for my own good, because I was forgetting to close the door and wasting electricity. The truth was, he wanted to control my caloric intake. He wanted me weak. Beatrice had left the tuna salad on the counter for me. It was warm and smelled slightly sour. I ate it anyway. I needed the fuel. A forensic accountant knows that you cannot balance the books if you are fainting from hunger. While I ate, I watched him work. He was pacing the living room on a call. "Mr. Henderson, I guarantee a 15% return within 6 months. This is not just land. This is the future site of the biggest eco-resort in the Midwest. We have the permits. We have the contractors. We just need visionaries like you to close the funding gap." Lies. Pure, unfiltered lies. I analyzed his pitch while I chewed the warm tuna. He was using a classic urgency trap coupled with an exclusivity hook. He was selling swampland, or maybe land he did not even own. I noted the name Henderson. I noted the promised return rate. I cataloged the lies in my mind, filing them away into categories of wire fraud securities, fraud, and theft by deception. Beatrice walked in. She looked thinner than she had 2 weeks ago. The gaslighting was taking a toll on her too. She was walking on eggshells trying to keep the peace between a husband she was terrified of and a father she thought was losing his mind. "Dad," she whispered. "Did you eat?" I nodded, pointing to the empty bowl. She looked at the padlock on the fridge, then at me. Her eyes filled with tears. "I am sorry," she said. He says it is temporary. Just until we get your medication sorted out." I reached out and patted her hand. My hand trembled on purpose. I needed her to keep believing the lie for now. If she knew I was lucid, she might give it away. She was not a good liar. "It is okay, honey," I rasped. "I understand. Bradley is smart. He knows best." She flinched. She hated hearing me say that, but she needed to hear it to validate her own cowardice. "I have to go to the store," she said. "Do you need anything? Just some rest," I said. She left. I was alone with the wolf. The afternoon was the hardest part. Bradley liked to turn off the water heater breaker before he started his workday. He said hot water was a luxury I had not earned. So when I went to wash my face, the water was biting cold. It shocked my system, but it also woke me up. It sharpened my senses. I looked in the mirror. I let my face go slack, practicing the vacant stare of the dementia patient he claimed I was. But behind the eyes, the calculator was running. I needed access to his laptop. He was careful. He took it with him everywhere. But he had a weakness. Arrogance. He thought he was untouchable in this house. He thought I was a piece of furniture. Around 3 o'clock, he had a video conference. He set up the laptop on the dining table, angling it so the background showed the expensive art on the walls, art that Catherine and I had collected over 40 years. He wanted to look successful. He put on the shirt I had washed. He smiled at the camera. "Gentlemen, thank you for joining. Thorn Capital is ready to move to Phase 2. I shuffled into the room carrying a dust rag. I started dusting the sideboard behind him. "Get out of here, Gus," Bradley hissed, muttering out of the side of his mouth while keeping a smile for the camera. I pretended not to hear. I dusted a vase, knocking it slightly so it wobbled. Bradley's eye twitched. He muted his microphone. I said, "Get out. Go to your room." I looked at him confused. "My room, yes. Upstairs." Now I shuffled away, moving as slowly as possible. But as I turned, I tripped. I fell forward, catching myself on the edge of the table right next to his laptop. "Watch it, you clumsy old fool," Bradley yelled. I apologized profusely, my hands flailing. In the chaos, my thumb brushed the side of his laptop. I was not just catching my balance. I was inserting a nano receiver into the USB port on the back. It was smaller than a fingernail, painted matte black to blend in with the casing. I had bought it years ago for a case involving corporate espionage and had kept it in my hollowed-out copy of Moby Dick. I am sorry, I wailed. "Just go!" Bradley screamed, shoving me toward the stairs. I went up the stairs, my steps heavy and uneven, but inside I was sprinting. The receiver was in. Now I just needed him to type. I spent the rest of the evening in my room listening to the click-clack of his keyboard through the floorboards. Every keystroke was being logged. Every password. Every account number. Every incriminating email to his mistress. He was digging his own grave with every letter he typed, and I was the one holding the shovel. Night fell. The house went quiet. Bradley and Beatrice went to the master bedroom, my bedroom, the one I had shared with Catherine. That was the deepest insult. Sleeping in my bed while I slept on a cot in the guest room. But tonight I did not sleep. I waited until the clock struck 2. The silence of the suburbs is heavy thick with the sound of settling foundations and distant trains. I slipped out of bed. My back pain vanished. My tremors ceased. I moved with the silent grace of a man who had once tailed a suspect for 6 blocks without being seen. I needed visual confirmation. The keylogger would give me the data, but I needed to link the man to the crime. I needed his face on screen while he was moving the stolen money. I went to the hallway closet. I had a stash of supplies hidden inside an old vacuum cleaner bag. Micro cameras. Motion activated with a 12-hour battery life. They were the size of a button. I crept downstairs. The floorboards creaked. I froze. I waited. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator. I moved into the dining room. I placed one camera inside the hollow of the curtain rod facing the table. I placed another on the bookshelf nestled between the spines of 2 encyclopedias. I adjusted the angles. They would capture the screen and his face perfectly. Then I went to the kitchen. I looked at the padlock on the fridge. It was a master lock. Standard model. I could shim it in 10 seconds, but that would leave evidence. Instead, I looked at the hinge. Bradley had screwed the hasp into the wood of the cabinet frame. He was an amateur. He had used short screws. I took a butter knife from the drawer. I quietly unscrewed the bottom hinge. The door swung open from the wrong side. I took a carton of orange juice and a block of cheddar cheese. Then I screwed the hinge back in. I sat on the floor in the dark, eating cheese and drinking juice, fueling up for the analysis I would have to do later. I felt like a rat in my own home scrounging for crumbs. But rats are survivors. Rats bring down ships. I went back upstairs. I sat at my desk in the guest room and opened my old laptop, the one I kept hidden under the floorboard beneath the rug. I booted it up. I connected to the receiver I had planted on Bradley's computer. The data stream started to flow. It was beautiful. I saw his login for the Cayman Islands bank account. I saw the emails to a woman named Candace discussing flight prices to Mexico. I saw the ledger. I opened the spreadsheet. It was worse than I thought. He was not just running a Ponzi scheme. He was laundering money for a local syndicate. I recognized the shell company names. Red Star Logistics, Blue Water Holdings. These were fronts for the Albanian mob in Chicago. Bradley was washing their cash through his real estate deals, skimming a little off the top to pay his gambling debts and hoping they would not notice. "You idiot," I whispered to the screen. "You are not stealing from retirees. You are stealing from killers." This changed everything. If the mob found out what he was doing, they would not just sue him. They would come to this house and they would burn it down with all of us inside. The threat level had just escalated from financial ruin to physical annihilation. I needed to act fast, but I needed more. I needed the smoking gun. I needed the transfer order where he moved the house title. I kept watching the data. He was browsing Zillow, looking at my house. He had listed it as pending sale. He was trying to sell it to a cash buyer, a flipper who would not ask too many questions. The closing date was set for tomorrow. He was going to forge my signature on the final deed transfer tomorrow morning. I closed the laptop. I had the plan. I crept back to my cot. I lay down and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow I would have to play the performance of a lifetime. I would have to let him think he had won right up until the moment the ink dried. But for now, I had to endure one more humiliation. The sun came up. I heard the heavy footsteps of my son-in-law coming down the hall. He banged on my door. "Wake up, Gus, laundry day, and do not think you are getting out of mopping the kitchen floor. Beatrice spilled milk, and I am not cleaning it up." I let out a groan, a sound of old age and misery. "Coming, Bradley." I called out, my voice trembling. I got up. I put on my slippers. I hunched my shoulders. I walked out into the hallway and saw him standing there, smug and victorious. "You look terrible, Gus," he said, grinning. "Maybe we should call that home today. Sunny Meadows is looking better and better, right?" I looked at him. I looked at the man who was threatening my life and my daughter's future. And I smiled a weak, senile smile. "Whatever you say, Bradley," I said. "You are the boss." He clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make me stagger. "That is right. Remember that. Now get the mop." I walked to the closet. I grabbed the mop. I filled the bucket. And as I swirled the dirty water, I thought about the files on my hard drive. I thought about the cameras recording his every move. And I thought about the look on his face when he realized that the old man mopping his floor was actually the one holding the pen that would write the end of his life. 2 weeks of cold water. 2 weeks of hunger. 2 weeks of silence. It was a high price to pay. But the receipt was going to be worth every penny. The Cold War was over. The nuclear option was armed. And tomorrow I was going to push the button. The silence in the house was heavier than the humid Chicago air outside. Bradley had left an hour ago claiming he had a late-night strategy meeting with international investors, but the GPS tracker I had slipped into the lining of his briefcase told a different story. He was parked outside a clandestine poker room in the warehouse district, a place known for high stakes and broken kneecaps. This was my window. This was the moment I had been waiting for to pull my daughter out of the burning building before the roof collapsed. I found Beatrice in the living room, sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes. She was packing away Catherine's collection of porcelain figurines, wrapping each one in newspaper, with a tenderness that broke my heart. Bradley had ordered her to clear out the display cabinets to make room for his modern art rentals. He wanted the house to look staged for the sale he was so sure would happen tomorrow. Beatrice looked exhausted, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, her eyes red-rimmed and dull. She looked like a woman who was drowning in slow motion and had forgotten how to swim. I walked into the room. I did not shuffle. I did not use my cane. I walked with the steady, purposeful stride of the man who used to lead federal raids. Beatrice didn't even look up at first. She was too lost in the rhythm of her own submission. "Beatrice," I said, my voice low and firm. "Stop packing." She flinched, dropping a ceramic shepherdess. It didn't break, but it rolled across the carpet, stopping at my feet. She looked up at me, her eyes widening as she registered my posture. I wasn't the trembling old man she had been feeding tuna salad to for 2 weeks. I was her father. "Dad," she whispered, wiping her hands on her jeans. "You should be in bed. If Bradley comes back and sees you up—" "Bradley is not coming back for hours," I interrupted. "He is currently down on West Kinsey Street, trying to win back the money he stole from us." Beatrice shook her head, a reflex of denial that had become her default setting. "No, Dad. He is at a meeting. He is meeting with Mr. Henderson about the eco-resort. He told me." "He lied," I said. I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out a stack of folded papers. They were printouts from the keylogger data I had harvested over the last 48 hours. I had highlighted the relevant sections in yellow marker. I walked over and sat on the ottoman in front of her. I needed to be on her level. I needed her to see my eyes. "Beatrice, you need to look at this." She recoiled as if the papers were radioactive. "I do not want to see your conspiracy theories, Dad. I am tired. I just want to finish this so we can move." "This is not a theory," I said, placing the papers on her lap. "This is math. And math does not lie. Look at the date. Tuesday the 12th. That was the day you transferred your savings into the joint account. $50,000. The money Mom left you. The money you were saving for a down payment on your own place before you moved in here. Beatrice looked down at the paper against her will. I see it, she said, her voice defensive. We moved it to the Thorn Capital Operating Fund. Bradley said we needed liquidity to secure the permits. It is an investment. It is going to double in 6 months. Turn the page, I said gently. She hesitated, but her hand moved. She flipped the page. It was a bank statement from the Thorn Capital Operating Fund. It showed the incoming $50,000, and then 3 hours later an outgoing wire transfer. Look at the recipient. Beatrice, is that a permit office? Is that a contractor? She squinted. Greenfelt Enterprises, LLC. I leaned in close. That is a shell company for an online gambling syndicate based in Antigua. Bradley didn't buy permits, honey. He bought chips. Virtual chips. No, she whispered. No, that is probably just the name of the holding company. You do not understand how high finance works, Dad. Bradley says these companies have weird names for tax purposes. I felt a surge of nausea. She was parroting him. She was using his words to cover his crimes. It was like watching a ventriloquist act where the dummy was my own flesh and blood. Beatrice, look at the next line. Account balance. 0. She stared at the number. 0. He lost it all, Bay. In 45 minutes. He played blackjack at $500 a hand, and he lost every cent your mother wanted you to have. He didn't invest it. He incinerated it. Tears began to well up in her eyes, but they weren't tears of realization yet. They were tears of panic. Her brain was fighting a war between the reality on the page and the reality her husband had constructed for her. The cognitive dissonance was tearing her apart. It is a mistake, she stammered. The bank made a mistake. Or maybe he moved it to another account. A secure account. He told me he was moving assets around to protect them from you. From me, I asked, incredulous. He says you are vindictive, she said, her voice rising in pitch. He says you would try to freeze the assets if you knew. That is why he had to hide it. He is protecting our future, Dad. I grabbed her shoulders. I needed to shake her, not physically, but spiritually. I needed to wake her up. He is not protecting you. He is drowning you. Beatrice, look at me. I hacked his laptop. I saw his emails. He is not building a resort. He is looking up extradition treaties. He is searching for countries that do not send Americans back for financial crimes. He is planning to run, and he is not planning to take you with him. I pulled out the last photo. It was a grainy image captured by the webcam on Bradley's laptop when he thought he was alone. It showed him holding up 2 plane tickets. One for him, one for a woman named Candace. Who is this? I asked, thrusting the photo into her line of sight. Is this a business partner? Beatrice stared at the photo. Her face went pale as a sheet. She knew. Somewhere deep down in the part of her she had buried under layers of denial, she knew. That is his assistant, she whispered. His assistant who he is taking to Cabo on Sunday. The day after the house sale closes, Beatrice let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She shoved my hands away. She scrambled backward, knocking over a box of books. Stop it! Just stop it! She grabbed the papers from her lap. For a second, I thought she was going to read them again. I thought she was going to finally see the truth. But instead, she crumpled them in her fists. She tore them in half, then in quarters. She ripped the evidence of her husband's betrayal into confetti and threw it at me. You are lying, she screamed, her face twisted and ugly with misplaced rage. You photoshopped these, you made them up. You have always hated him, Beatrice. From the moment I brought him home, you looked down on him, she yelled, standing up and pacing the room like a caged animal. You judged him because he didn't go to an Ivy League school. You judged him because he takes risks. You are jealous, Dad. You are a sad, lonely old man who is jealous that his daughter is happy. I asked, my voice cracking. Beatrice, look at yourself. You have lost 20 pounds. You have panic attacks. You are packing your dead mother China in the middle of the night because you are terrified of your husband. This is not happiness. This is a hostage situation. He loves me, she shrieked. He is a genius. He is going to change the world, and you are just trying to drag him down because you are miserable. You want me to be alone like you. You want me to stay in this dusty old house and take care of you until you die. Well, I won't do it. I choose him. Do you hear me? I choose him, she was panting, her chest heaving. The room fell silent. The torn papers lay scattered on the rug like snow. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the little girl I had taught to ride a bike. The teenager I had comforted when she didn't get into her first choice college. The woman I had walked down the aisle just yesterday. And I realized she was gone. Bradley had not just stolen her money. He had stolen her mind. He had rewritten her memories, reprogrammed her loyalty, and turned her against the only person in the world who would actually die for her. He had done a thorough job. He had isolated her, broken her self-esteem, and built himself up as her savior. It was a masterpiece of psychological abuse. I realized then that logic was useless. You cannot reason with a cult member. You cannot use facts to fight faith. And that is what Bradley was to her. He was a religion, a false god she had sacrificed everything to worship. If I kept pushing, she would not leave him. She would warn him. She would tell him I knew about the gambling. She would tell him I had hacked his computer. And then he would destroy the evidence. He would smash the laptop, burn the drives, and disappear with whatever cash he could squeeze out of the house sale, leaving Beatrice with the debt and the heartbreak. I had to stop trying to save her with the truth. The truth was too painful for her to accept right now. I stood up. I brushed the paper scraps off my knees. I looked at her with a face devoid of the pity and fear I felt inside. I put the mask back on. Okay, Beatrice, I said quietly. She stopped panting. She looked at me confused by my sudden surrender. Okay, you are right, I said, my shoulders slumping back into the posture of the defeated old man. I am confused. My mind, it plays tricks on me. I made those papers on my computer. I don't know why. I guess I am just scared of being alone. Beatrice exhaled a long, shaky breath. The tension left her body, replaced by a familiar mix of relief and condescension. She needed me to be the villain or the invalid, so she could be the righteous victim. I knew it, she whispered. She walked over and hugged me. It was a stiff hug, a hug without warmth. Oh, Dad, we have to get you help. This isn't healthy. You are obsessing. I patted her back. My hand felt heavy as lead. I know, sweetie. I am sorry. I won't fight anymore. Good, she said, pulling away. Good. Now please go to bed. Bradley will be home soon, and I don't want him to see this mess. He gets so stressed when things are messy. I nodded. I turned and walked toward the stairs. I climbed the steps slowly, listening to her cleaning up the torn papers below. She was sweeping away the truth, putting it in the trash, so she wouldn't have to look at it. When I reached the top of the stairs, I went into my room and closed the door. I didn't turn on the light. I stood in the dark, looking out the window at the street below. I felt a coldness settling in my chest. It was the coldness of a surgeon picking up a scalpel. It was the coldness of a soldier chambering a round. I had tried the soft way. I had tried the fatherly way. I had tried to pull her gently from the edge of the cliff, but she had slapped my hand away and jumped. So now I had to do it the hard way. I had to let her hit the bottom. I had to destroy Bradley Thorne so completely, so publicly, and so undeniably that she would have no choice but to see the wreckage. I couldn't just expose him. I had to obliterate him. I had to strip him of his pride, his money, his freedom, and his mask. I had to make him look so small and so pathetic that her worship would turn to disgust. It was going to hurt her. It was going to break her heart. It might even make her hate me for a while. But it was the only way to save her life. I went to my desk and opened the laptop. The screen glowed blue in the darkness. I pulled up the file labeled Operation Closing Day. Tomorrow was the closing. Tomorrow Bradley would walk into the bank expecting a check for $1.5 million. Tomorrow he would think he had won. I looked at the digital copy of the deed transfer document on my screen, the one he had forced me to sign. I picked up the phone and dialed Sullivan. "Sullivan," I said. "It is Gus." "Go ahead, Gus," Sullivan answered immediately. "The daughter is compromised," I said, my voice flat. "She rejected the intel. She is hostile." "I am sorry," Gus Sullivan said. "I know how much you wanted to spare her." "We are past that now," I said. "Proceed with the nuclear option. Alert the FBI. Send the package to the district attorney, and call your contact at the bank." "Are you sure?" Sullivan asked. "Once we pull this thread, the whole sweater unravels. Beatrice is going to be in the crossfire." I looked at the photo of Beatrice on my nightstand. She was 5 years old, holding a goldfish in a plastic bag, smiling like she held the whole world. "I know," I said, "but sometimes you have to break the bone to reset it. Do it." I hung up. I lay down on my cot, but I didn't sleep. I listened to the sound of Bradley's car pulling into the driveway an hour later. I heard the front door open. I heard his voice loud and booming telling Beatrice about his successful meeting. I heard her apologizing for the mess. I lay there in the dark, and I waited for the dawn. Tomorrow I would lose my son-in-law. I might lose my daughter. But I would get my house back. And more importantly, I would get justice. And justice, as I had learned over a lifetime of service, is a dish best served cold. Tomorrow, Bradley Thorne was going to freeze to death. The invitation Bradley sent out called it an exclusive pre-closing gala for the investors of the eco-resort project, but anyone with eyes could see it for what it was. It was a victory lap. It was a premature celebration of a heist that hadn't quite cleared the bank. He had invited 20 of his top marks. The people he had swindled out of their retirement funds and savings accounts to my house to drink my wine and toast to his genius. He wanted to show them the tangible assets. He wanted to show them the mansion that anchored his portfolio, even though the ink on the deed transfer was not even wet yet. At 5 o'clock, Bradley came into the kitchen where I was eating a slice of dry toast. He was holding a garment bag. He unzipped it and threw a jacket at me. It smelled of mothballs and dust. It was an old dinner jacket I had not worn since 1998, a relic from a charity ball Catherine had dragged me to. It was slightly yellowed at the collar and missing a button. "Put this on," he ordered, checking his reflection in the microwave door. "Why?" I asked, not moving. "Because tonight you are working," he said, fixing his cufflinks. "I told the investors that we are taking care of you, but I also told them you like to feel useful. It keeps the dementia at bay. So tonight you are the sommelier. You are going to walk around with a bottle of red and a bottle of white, and you are going to keep their glasses full. And you are going to keep your mouth shut unless someone asks you for a refill. Do you understand? He wanted to humiliate me. He wanted to parade me in front of his victims like a trophy. Look at the old man I conquered. Look how weak he is. It was a power move designed to cement his dominance in his own mind. I stood up slowly, my joints popping. I took the jacket. "Whatever you say, Bradley," I said, my voice raspy and defeated. "I just want to help." "Good," he sneered, "and try not to drool on the guests." I went to the bathroom to change. I looked at myself in the mirror. The jacket hung loose on my frame. I looked pathetic. I looked exactly like what he wanted me to look like. A broken old servant. But as I buttoned the jacket, I felt a cold thrill running down my spine. He was making a tactical error, a fatal one. He was giving me access. He was putting me in the room with the money. He was letting the fox into the henhouse and telling the chickens that the fox was just a senile old dog. Forensic accounting is mostly about paper trails, but human intelligence is about leverage. Bradley investors were not sophisticated. They were greedy and they were nervous. They were putting money into a black box and hoping for a miracle. They were the perfect targets for a psychological operation. The guests began to arrive at 7. They were a mix of local business owners, doctors, and a few retirees with too much equity and not enough sense. They drove Mercedes and BMWs, parking them on my lawn because Bradley had not thought to hire a valet. They walked into my foyer oohing and aahing at the architecture, touching the woodwork, asking if the chandelier was original crystal. Bradley was in his element. He was holding court in the living room, a glass of scotch in one hand, gesturing wildly with the other. "This is just the beginning, folks," he boomed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "This house, it is just a stepping stone, a temporary headquarters. The resort in Wisconsin is going to make this place look like a shack. We are talking luxury yurts, solar-powered spas. We have the zoning board in our pocket." I circulated through the room, moving silently on the plush carpets. I held a bottle of Cabernet in one hand and a napkin in the other. I kept my head down, my eyes averted. I was the invisible man. "Wine, sir," I whispered to a man in a loud checkered suit. He held out his glass without looking at me. "Fill it up, Pops." I poured. As the red liquid swirled into the glass, I leaned in slightly, just enough to be heard, but not enough to seem intrusive. "I hope the zoning board cleared up that issue with the water table," I muttered, as if talking to myself. The man froze. He looked at me. "What was that?" I blinked, feigning confusion. "Oh, nothing, sir. Just the water table. The EPA inspector was here last week. Or was it the week before? My memory is not what it used to be, but he seemed very angry about the groundwater contamination. Enjoy your wine." I shuffled away before he could ask another question. I saw him frown. I saw him look across the room at Bradley, who was laughing at his own joke. I saw the man take a sip of wine, but he didn't swallow it immediately. He was thinking. The seed was planted. I moved to a group of 3 women standing by the fireplace. They were discussing the projected returns. "Bradley says 18% in the first year," one of them said. "That is conservative." I stepped in, offering the white wine. 18%, I mumbled, shaking my head sadly. "That is what the last one said too." Before the indictment. One of the women turned to me, sharp and alarmed. "Excuse me." "What indictment?" I looked panicked, as if I had said something I shouldn't have. "Oh no, I am confused. Forget I said anything. Bradley says I imagine things. The lawyers, the subpoenas, it is all in my head. Just like the money." I poured the wine with a shaking hand, spilling a few drops on the hearth. "I am sorry, so sorry. Please do not tell him. He gets so mad when I talk about the investigation." I retreated, leaving them in a stunned silence. They weren't looking at the fire anymore. They were looking at Bradley, and for the first time I saw doubt in their eyes. Fear is a contagion. It spreads faster than a virus, especially in a room full of people who are gambling with money they cannot afford to lose. I worked the room for an hour. I was a ghost weaving through the party, dropping little poison pills of information into every conversation. I whispered about tax liens to the dentist. I muttered about a non-existent brother-in-law who went to prison for wire fraud to the retired teacher. I asked the tech entrepreneur if he knew that the property title was held by a shell company in the Cayman Islands that had been flagged by the IRS. I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed to ask the questions that Bradley had successfully stopped them from asking themselves. I was the voice of their own suppressed paranoia. Then I saw him, Henderson, the whale, the man Bradley needed to close the gap on his debts to the mob. He was a large man with a red face and a suit that cost more than my car. He was standing in the corner near the piano looking skeptical. He wasn't drinking. He was watching Bradley with the eyes of a predator assessing a meal. This was the key. If I could turn Henderson, the whole house of cards would collapse tonight. I walked over to him. I didn't offer him wine. I just stood next to him looking at the piano. My wife used to play this, I said softly, dropping the senile act just a fraction. Before she died, she loved this house. Henderson looked down at me. He didn't dismiss me like the others. He saw something. Maybe he saw the intelligence behind the act. "It is a nice house," he grunted. "Your son-in-law seems to think it is his ticket to the big leagues." I chuckled a dry, humorless sound. "Bradley thinks a lot of things," I said. "He thinks he is a developer. He thinks he is a genius. He thinks the people he borrowed money from in the warehouse district are going to forgive him if he pays them with other people's money." Henderson turned his full body toward me. His eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" I looked him straight in the eye. I said, "He is robbing Peter to pay Paul, Mr. Henderson. And Paul carries a baseball bat. This house, he doesn't own it. He is forging the deed transfer tomorrow. The resort, the land, is designated wetlands. You cannot build a birdhouse on it, let alone a spa." Henderson stared at me. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "Really?" "I am the man who used to audit guys like Bradley for a living," I said. "And I am telling you, do not sign the check, unless you want to be a co-conspirator in a federal RICO case." Henderson didn't say anything for a long moment. He looked at Bradley, who was currently standing on a chair, raising a glass for a toast. "Friends," Bradley shouted. "To the future." The room responded with a tepid cheer. The energy had shifted. The whispers I had started were circulating. People were checking their phones. They were exchanging nervous glances. Henderson looked back at me. "You better be right, old-timer." I tapped the side of my nose. "Check the public records for Blue Water Holdings. Check the permit filings for Dane County, Wisconsin. You will find empty lots and shell corporations." Henderson nodded once, a microscopic movement. Then he walked away. He didn't go to get a drink. He went to the front door. He walked out without saying a word to Bradley. I watched him go, one domino down. Bradley didn't notice immediately. He was too busy basking in his own glory. He hopped down from the chair and spotted me standing near the piano. He saw that I wasn't serving. "Gus," he yelled, snapping his fingers, "the lady over there needs a refill." "Move it." The room went quiet. The guests looked at Bradley, then at me. The cruelty in his voice was naked. It was the voice of a bully. I walked toward him. I moved slowly, dragging my left leg a little more than necessary. I stopped in front of him. I held out the tray with the wine bottle. "I am trying, Bradley," I said, my voice trembling. "I am just tired." "You are useless," he hissed, loud enough for the front row to hear. "God, I cannot wait to drop you off at the home. You are ruining the vibe." He grabbed the bottle from the tray, roughly almost knocking the glasses over. "Go to the kitchen," he ordered. "Stay there until everyone leaves." I looked at the guests. I looked at the dentist, the teacher, the tech guy. I let them see the fear in my eyes. I let them see the abuse. I wanted them to know exactly what kind of man they were trusting with their money. I lowered my head. "Yes, Bradley." I turned and shuffled toward the kitchen. As I pushed through the swinging door, I heard the murmurs start up again. They weren't talking about the resort anymore. They were talking about him. "Did you see that?" He treats him like a dog? What was that about the investigation Henderson left? Did you see Henderson leave? I walked into the kitchen and let the door swing shut behind me. I stood there in the dark, leaning against the counter. I let the act drop. I straightened my spine. I took a deep breath. Beatrice was sitting at the kitchen table staring into a glass of water. She had been hiding in here all night, ashamed to face the people her husband was swindling. "Did you hear him?" she whispered. "He humiliated you, Dad." I poured myself a glass of tap water. "He humiliated himself, Beatrice," I said. "He just doesn't know it yet." Out in the dining room, the party was dying. I could hear the awkward goodbyes, the excuses. "Early morning tomorrow. Need to check with my accountant. We will call you." Bradley's voice was getting tighter, higher pitched. He was trying to stop the bleeding. "Wait, where are you going?" "We haven't cut the cake, Henderson. Where is Henderson?" The door slammed shut. Cars started up in the driveway. The gravel crunched under tires that were leaving too fast. Within 20 minutes, the house was silent. The music was still playing a jazz loop that sounded mocking in the empty room. The kitchen door flew open. Bradley stormed in. He looked deranged. His tie was pulled loose, his hair wild. He threw the wine bottle into the sink. It shattered, spraying red shards everywhere. "What did you do?" he screamed at me. I stood by the counter, calm and still. I did what you told me, Bradley." I served the wine. He marched up to me, getting right in my face. They were leaving Gus. They were asking questions, weird questions, about permits, about the water table. "Where did they get that? Did you talk to them?" I looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "I just told them you were smart, Bradley. I told them you handle everything. Even the... what did you call it?" "The wetlands." His face went white, then red again. "You senile old bat. You poisoned the well." Henderson left. He was the anchor. If he walks, they all walk. He grabbed the lapels of my jacket and slammed me against the refrigerator. "You owe me $1 million, old man. You just cost me everything." Beatrice stood up. "Bradley, stop. Let him go." He ignored her. He shook me, his teeth bared. "You are going to fix this. Tomorrow morning. The notary is coming back. And you are going to sign that deed transfer. And you are going to mile while you do it. And then I am going to dump you in the cheapest state-run facility I can find, and I am going to forget you ever existed." He released me, pushing me away so hard I stumbled. "Go to your room," he spat. "Get out of my sight." I adjusted my jacket. I brushed the imaginary dust off my shoulder. "Good night, Bradley," I said softly. "Sleep well. You are going to need it." I walked out of the kitchen, past the dining room where the half-eaten hors d'oeuvres sat stale on silver platters. I walked up the stairs to my room. He thought the party was a disaster because of bad luck. He didn't realize it was a controlled demolition. He thought he had lost a few investors. He didn't realize he had just lost his freedom. I went into my room and closed the door. I checked the laptop. The audio from the dining room was crystal clear. I had his threats. I had his admission of fraud. I had him assaulting a senior citizen. But the night wasn't over. The alcohol in his system was turning his panic into aggression. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals bite. I heard him downstairs screaming at Beatrice. I heard glass breaking. I sat on the edge of my cot and waited. I had one more card to play. The pen. Tomorrow morning he would come for the signature. He would bring the knife. He would force my hand. And I would give him exactly what he wanted. A signature that would vanish into thin air, just like his future. I took the pen out of my pocket. I uncapped it and wrote on a scrap of paper. Augustus Wainwright. The blue ink gleamed in the moonlight. I watched it. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. Slowly, silently, the ink began to fade. By the time the clock struck midnight, the paper was blank. Perfect. I lay down and closed my eyes. The party was over. But the hangover was going to be lethal. The clock on the wall ticked past 2 in the morning, but the house was still awake, vibrating with the aftershocks of the disastrous party. The guests were long gone, fleeing the sinking ship of Bradley Thorne reputation, but the captain was still on the bridge, drinking himself into a stupor. I could hear him downstairs, pacing the hardwood floors of the living room, muttering to himself, kicking furniture and pouring glass after glass of my vintage scotch. He was spiraling. I knew the signs. I had interrogated enough white-collar criminals to know that the most dangerous moment is not when they get caught, but when they realize the walls are closing in and they have no exit strategy. I sat on the edge of my cot in the guest room listening. I was fully dressed. I had not slept. I was waiting for the inevitable escalation. My hands were folded in my lap, and between my fingers I held the blue gel pen I had prepared hours ago. It was a standard-looking pilot pen, the kind you can buy in a blister pack at any pharmacy for $3. But the ink cartridge inside was something special, something I had ordered from a specialty magic shop online 3 months ago, when I first started suspecting my son-in-law was a fraud. It was formulated to look like permanent ink for exactly 4 hours before oxidizing and vanishing completely, leaving no trace, not even a smudge. Downstairs, the pacing stopped. I heard the distinct sound of the knife block in the kitchen being disturbed, the slide of steel against wood. My heart rate remained steady, 60 beats per minute. Fear is a reaction, but panic is a choice. I chose readiness. Heavy footsteps thudded up the stairs. They were uneven, stumbling. He was drunk, but he was also running on pure adrenaline and rage. He did not knock. He kicked the door open with such force that the doorknob punched a hole in the drywall. Bradley stood in the doorway, illuminated by the hallway light. He had taken off his dinner jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his chest, stained with wine and sweat. In his right hand he held a carving knife. It was an 8-inch blade I used for Thanksgiving turkeys. The light caught the edge, making it gleam. "Get up," he slurred, his eyes bloodshot and wild. I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on my cane. I made sure my hands were shaking. I made sure my posture was hunched. I needed him to see a victim, not an adversary. "Bradley," I said, my voice trembling, "put the knife down. You are drunk." He laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "Drunk? Yeah, I am drunk. I have to be drunk to deal with you. You ruined it, Gus. You poisoned Henderson. He texted me. He said he is out. He said he is going to the authorities if I contact him again. Do you know what that means?" I took a step back, putting the small desk between us. "I do not know what you are talking about. Do not lie to me," he screamed, lunging forward and slamming the knife into the desk. The blade bit deep into the wood, vibrating. I flinched, genuine reflex mixing with my performance. Beatrice appeared in the doorway behind him. She was wearing her silk robe, her face pale and streaked with fresh tears. "Bradley, please," she begged, her voice thin with terror. "Stop it! You are scaring him! You are scaring me!" "Shut up, Beatrice," he roared without looking at her. "This is your fault, too. You let him talk to the guests. You let him wander around spreading his dementia poison. Well, I am done being nice. I am done waiting for the notary to come back tomorrow. We are doing this now." He yanked the knife out of the desk, splinters flying. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out the crumpled deed transfer document. He slammed it onto the desk next to the gouge mark. "Sign it." I looked at the paper. It was the same document he had tried to force on me before. The legal instrument that would transfer the title of my home, the home I had bought in 1985. The home where I had raised my daughter and nursed my dying wife, into the holding company owned by the Albanian syndicate. I cannot sign this, Bradley," I stammered. "It is the middle of the night. There is no notary. It won't be legal." "I do not care about legal," he screamed, spraying spit onto my face. "I care about possession. I walk into the bank tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and I hand them this. They notarize it in-house because I know the manager. I get the loan, I pay the Russians, and I stay alive. If I do not have this paper, Gus, I am a dead man. And if I am a dead man, I am taking you with me." He raised the knife, pointing it at my throat. The tip was inches from my jugular. I could see the madness in his eyes. This was not a bluff. He had reached the event horizon of his desperation. He had convinced himself that killing me was a viable solution to his financial problems. If I refused, he would stab me. He would claim self-defense, say I attacked him in a senile rage. Beatrice would be too terrified to contradict him. I looked at Beatrice. She was paralyzed, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She was watching her husband threaten to murder her father, and she was frozen. It was the final confirmation I needed. She could not save me. I had to save myself. "Okay," I whispered, letting my voice break. "Okay, Bradley. Please, just do not hurt me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the pen. My hand shook violently, rattling the pen against the paper. "Use my pen!" he snarled, reaching for a fancy fountain pen in his pocket. I dropped my pen. It clattered onto the floor, rolling toward his feet. I let out a whimper of fear. "I am sorry. I am sorry. I am just so nervous." He looked at the pen on the floor, then at me with disgust. He kicked my pen back toward me. "Pick it up. Just sign the damn paper." I crouched down, my knees popping. I picked up the blue gel pen. The magic wand. I stood up. I uncapped it. Where I asked, holding the pen over the paper. There he yelled, stabbing his finger at the signature line. "Right above your printed name. And make it legible, Gus. If you mess this up, I will cut your fingers off." I took a breath. I looked at the paper. I looked at the knife. And then I touched the pen to the page. The ink flowed smoothly. A rich, deep blue. It looked permanent. It looked official. I wrote carefully. I did not write Augustus Wainwright. I did not write Gus. I wrote a name that had been a running joke between Sullivan and me for 30 years, a reference to a fictional character who lived a double life, who was half hero and half villain, Harvey Dent. I added a flourish at the end, making it look complex and authoritative. To a drunk, panicked man in the middle of the night, it looked like a signature. It looked like compliance. I stepped back, dropping the pen on the desk. "There," I said, "it is done. You have the house." Bradley snatched the paper. He stared at the blue ink. He didn't read the name. He just saw the filled line. He saw the salvation of his kneecaps. He let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. Finally, he whispered. Finally. He looked at me, and for a second I thought he might just leave. I thought he might take his prize and go pass out. But bullies are never satisfied with just winning. They need to punish you for making them fight. He smiled, a cruel twisting of his lips. "You made me work for this, Gus. You embarrassed me tonight. You made me look weak in front of my investors." He stepped forward. He pulled his leg back. I saw it coming, but I did not dodge. I could not dodge. I had to take it. I had to be the victim one last time. His foot connected with my midsection. It was a hard, vicious kick. The air left my lungs in a rush. I crumbled to the floor, curling into a fetal position, gasping for breath. The pain radiated through my ribs, a sharp, hot agony. Dad, Beatrice screamed. She ran forward, dropping to her knees beside me. "Bradley, what did you do?" "He deserved it," Bradley spat, looking down at me with contempt. "He is lucky I didn't use the knife." He folded the deed carefully and put it in his breast pocket, patting it like a precious talisman. "We are leaving at 6 a.m., he told Beatrice. "You pack his bags. I am dropping him at the state shelter on the way to the bank. I do not want to see his face when I get back." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving the door hanging off its hinges. I heard his heavy footsteps going down the hall, then the slam of the master bedroom door. I lay on the floor, clutching my ribs. The pain was real, but the satisfaction was deeper. I had done it. I had planted the bomb. Beatrice was crying, stroking my hair. "Dad, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't know he would. I didn't think." I coughed, tasting a little copper in my mouth. I rolled onto my back. I looked up at my daughter. "Help me up, Bea," I rasped. She put her arms under my shoulders and hoisted me up. I groaned as I sat on the edge of the cot. "I have to call the police," she sobbed. "I have to call someone." "He is crazy, Dad. He is going to kill us." "No," I said, gripping her arm. "Not yet. But he has the deed. He is going to sell the house. We have nowhere to go." I looked at the desk where the indentation of the knife was still visible in the wood. "He has a piece of paper, Beatrice," I said, my voice gaining strength. "That is all he has. But he is going to the bank." "Let him go," I said. "Let him walk into that bank. Let him hand that paper to the loan officer. Let him think he is a millionaire for a few more hours." Beatrice looked at me, confused by my calm. "Dad, you are in shock. He kicked you. You might have internal bleeding." "I am fine," I said. "I have taken harder hits than that from men twice his size." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. I wiped the small trickle of blood from the corner of my mouth. Then I did something that made Beatrice recoil in confusion. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It wasn't the smile of a grandfather. It was the smile of a predator who has just heard the trap snap shut. "Go to sleep, Beatrice," I said. "Pack a bag for yourself. Not for me. For you. Because when the sun comes up, this house is going to become a war zone, and I want you to be ready to leave." "But the deed," she whispered. I leaned back on the pillow, closing my eyes. I pictured the document in Bradley's pocket. I pictured the blue ink molecules reacting with the oxygen in the air. I pictured the bonds breaking, the color fading, the letters dissolving into nothingness. "By 6 a.m. that paper will be blank," I said softly. Beatrice stared at me. "What Harvey Dent?" I whispered. "What are you talking about?" "Dad, who is Harvey Dent?" I opened one eye. A signature, Beatrice. A signature that only exists in the dark. She stood up slowly, backing away from me as if I were the one who was dangerous. Maybe for the first time she was seeing the truth. Bradley was a thug, but her father. Her father was something else entirely. "Go to bed," I repeated. She left, closing the broken door as best she could. I lay in the dark, listening to the house settle. My ribs throbbed in time with my heartbeat. I checked my watch. 2:30 a.m. 3.5 hours until the ink vanished. 6.5 hours until the bank opened. Bradley Thorne was sleeping with a blank piece of paper in his pocket, believing it was a check for $2 million. He was sleeping the sleep of the victorious. I closed my eyes and let the pain in my ribs sharpen my focus. Sleep well, son-in-law, because tomorrow you are going to wake up in a nightmare, and I am going to be the monster under your bed. The dawn broke over Chicago with a gray metallic light that promised rain, but delivered only humidity. I was already miles away from the suburban prison of my own home, sitting in a leather chair that felt far more comfortable than the cot I had occupied for 2 weeks. The coffee here was hot, fresh, and served in a ceramic mug with the seal of the Department of Justice printed on the side. Across the table sat Sullivan, my old friend and attorney, looking sharp in a pinstripe suit that cost more than Bradley Thorne made in a legitimate year. Next to him was Special Agent Miller, a man I had trained 20 years ago, who was now the head of the Financial Crimes Division. While I sipped my coffee in the climate-controlled safety of the federal building, Bradley was walking into the First National Bank on Michigan Avenue. I knew his schedule because I had access to his calendar. I knew his route because I was tracking his phone. And I knew his mindset because I had once profiled men exactly like him. He was walking on air. He was vibrating with the manic energy of a gambler who thinks he has just beaten the house. He had the deed in his breast pocket folded next to his heart. He thought he was minutes away from a wire transfer that would save his life. Agent Miller plugged the external hard drive I had provided into his secure laptop. The room was silent save for the hum of the hard drive spinning up. "This is everything," Gus Miller asked, looking at me over the rim of his glasses. Everything I said. The shell companies, the offshore accounts in the Caymans, the ledger of investors he defrauded, and the communications with the syndicate. It is all there. Miller clicked a file. He whistled low and long. He is running a classic Ponzi scheme inside a money laundering operation. He is taking cash from the Albanians to buy imaginary real estate, then paying them back with money he steals from retirees. He is robbing Peter to pay Paul, but Paul is a hitman. Sullivan leaned forward. And last night he escalated. He assaulted Gus. He threatened him with a knife. He forged a medical document to facilitate a kidnapping. We are adding attempted murder and kidnapping to the RICO charges. I closed my eyes for a second, visualizing the scene happening 5 miles away. Bradley would be entering the bank lobby right now. He would be bypassing the line, walking straight to the office of the branch manager, a man named Henderson, who was not the investor Henderson, but a corrupt little bureaucrat Bradley had bribed with Bears tickets and promises of kickbacks. I could see it in my mind. Bradley straightening his tie, smoothing his hair, trying to hide the fact that he was hungover and smelled of fear sweat. He would shake hands. He would smile that shark smile. "Mr. Thorne," the manager would say, "good to see you. Do you have the paperwork?" And Bradley would reach into his pocket. He would pull out the document. The paper that he had forced me to sign at knife point 6 hours ago. The paper that was his lifeline. Back in the FBI conference room, Miller was scrolling through the evidence. "This is airtight, Gus. We have him on wire fraud mail, fraud securities fraud. The audio recording of him practicing your signature is the nail in the coffin. We can pick him up right now." "Not yet," I said, opening my eyes. "Not at the bank." "Why not?" Sullivan asked. "He is a flight risk. Because he needs to know," I said. "He needs to know it was me. If you arrest him at the bank, he will think it was just bad luck or a snitch. He needs to come back to the house. He needs to see the empty room. He needs to realize that the senile old man he kicked in the ribs was the one who pulled the trigger." Sullivan looked at me. He saw the darkness in my eyes. He nodded. "We will set up a perimeter around your house. We will take him when he returns." I checked my watch. 9:15. The ink would be gone. At the bank, Bradley sat across from the manager. He placed the deed on the mahogany desk. He smoothed it out with trembling fingers. "Here it is," he said, his voice thick with triumph. "Signed, sealed, and delivered. My father-in-law finally saw reason. Transfer the title and authorize the loan against the equity. I need the funds wired to the holding account by noon." The manager smiled greasily. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. Let us just verify the signature and notarize it." The manager opened the folder. He looked at the document. He frowned. He adjusted his glasses. He looked closer. "Mr. Thorne," he said slowly. "Is this a joke?" Bradley laughed nervously. "A joke, no. I need that money." "Why would it be a joke?" Because the manager said, pushing the paper back across the desk. "There is no signature." Bradley froze. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting in the heat. What he whispered. He grabbed the paper. He stared at the line above my printed name. The line where he had watched me write Harvey Dent in flowing blue ink. It was blank, pristine white. Not a smudge, not a dot. The ink had vanished as if it had never existed. No, Bradley stammered. No, no, no. I saw him sign it. I watched him do it. It was blue ink. It was right here. He rubbed the paper with his thumb, frantically trying to make the ink reappear. He held it up to the light. Nothing. Just empty space. Mr. Thorne, the manager, said, his voice cooling rapidly. I cannot notarize a blank document. And frankly, coming in here with this, it looks like you are wasting my time. Or worse. Bradley stood up, knocking his chair over. He was hyperventilating. The walls of the bank office were closing in on him. He looked at the clock. 9:20. The Russians were expecting confirmation by 10. If he did not have the money, he was a dead man. It is a trick, he screamed. The old man. He used a trick pen. The manager stood up, pressing a button under his desk. Silent alarm. Sir. You need to lower your voice. He tricked me, Bradley yelled, grabbing his hair. He knew. He knew the whole time. Security, the manager barked. 2 guards appeared at the door. Bradley looked at them, then at the blank paper in his hands. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The old man, the tuna salad, the trembling hands, the confusion. It was all a lie. I had played him. I had played him like a fiddle, and now the music was over. He grabbed his briefcase, stuffing the blank deed inside. I have to go, he muttered, stumbling toward the door. I have to go see him. I have to kill him. He pushed past the guards. He ran out of the bank onto the busy street. He was not thinking about the police anymore. He was not thinking about the fraud. He was thinking about pure, primal revenge. He was going to drive back to the suburbs, and he was going to finish what he started last night. He was going to tear the house down brick by brick until he found me. Back at the Federal Building, I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a text from the tracking app. Bradley was moving. He was moving fast. 80 miles an hour on the expressway, headed west. Headed home. He is coming, I said to Miller. Miller nodded. He picked up his radio. All units suspect is mobile. He is headed to the residence. Do not intercept on the highway. We want him at the house. We want him to walk into the trap. SWAT team is standing by. I stood up. My ribs ached, a dull throb that reminded me of the kick. I need to be there, I said. Gus Sullivan said, standing up to block me. That is not a good idea. He is dangerous. He is unhinged. That is my house, Sullivan, I said, and my daughter is inside. I left her there because I needed him to leave, but now I am going back to get her. Miller looked at Sullivan, then at me. He rides with us, Miller said. In the command vehicle. Vest and helmet. No arguments. I nodded. Deal. We took the elevator down to the garage. The tactical team was loading into black armored trucks. They looked like soldiers preparing for war. And in a way it was a war. A war for my legacy. A war for my dignity. As we drove through the city, siren silent lights flashing, I thought about Beatrice. I had told her to pack a bag. I had told her the house would be a war zone. I hoped she had listened. I hoped she was waiting by the back door ready to run. But a part of me knew she wasn't. A part of me knew she was still sitting in the living room waiting for her husband to come home and tell her everything was okay. She was waiting for the lie to become true. Bradley was ahead of us. He was driving like a maniac, weaving through traffic, running red lights. He was calling me. My burner phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, twice, 10 times. I didn't answer. I let it ring. Let him sweat. Let him scream into the void. Then he sent a text. One word. Dead. I showed it to Miller. Threat to life, Miller said into his radio. Authorization to breach granted. If he enters the house, we go in hard. We turned onto my street. It was a quiet street lined with oak trees and manicured lawns, a place where nothing bad was ever supposed to happen. We parked 2 houses down. The street was already blocked off by unmarked cars. The neighbors were peeking out from behind their curtains, wondering why the circus had come to town. I watched the monitor in the command truck. The camera feed from the drone overhead showed Bradley's black SUV screeching around the corner. He jumped the curb, tearing up the grass I had watered for 20 years. He slammed on the brakes in the driveway, narrowly missing the porch. He got out of the car. He didn't look like a businessman anymore. He looked like a beast. His shirt was torn. His face was purple. He was holding something in his hand. A tire iron. He marched toward the front door. "He is armed," Miller said. "Move in. Move in." Bradley kicked the front door. It flew open. He disappeared inside. My heart stopped. Beatrice was in there. "Go, go, go," Miller shouted. The doors of the tactical trucks flew open. Men in black gear swarmed the lawn. They moved with precision weapons raised. I sat in the truck watching the screen. I saw them breach the door. I heard the shouting over the radio. "Police, get down clear, left stairs. He is going up the stairs." Then a scream. "Beatrice." I opened the door of the truck. "Stay here!" Gus Sullivan yelled, grabbing my arm. I shook him off. I didn't run. I couldn't run, but I walked as fast as my battered body would allow. I walked toward my house, toward the shattered door, toward the scream of my daughter. I walked into the foyer. It was full of smoke from a flashbang grenade. Debris was everywhere. The expensive vase Bradley had bought with stolen money was shattered on the floor. I looked up the stairs. Bradley was on the landing. He had Beatrice in a headlock. He was holding the tire iron up, ready to strike. He was surrounded by 6 SWAT officers with rifles pointed at his chest. "Drop it," the lead officer screamed. Bradley looked wild. He looked cornered. He looked down and saw me standing in the foyer amidst the smoke and the ruin. "You!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "You did this. You tricked me. The ink, the goddamn ink!" I looked up at him. I looked at my daughter, who was sobbing, her eyes locked on mine. "Let her go, Bradley," I said, my voice calm, cutting through the chaos. "It is over. The bank knows. The FBI knows. Even the Russians know. You have nothing left to trade." He tightened his grip on Beatrice. "I have the house," he yelled. "This is my house. I have rights." I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a single piece of paper, a copy of the document I had retrieved from my safe deposit box weeks ago. "You have nothing," I said. I started walking up the stairs. The officers shouted at me to stop, but I ignored them. I walked until I was 5 steps below him. "You tried to steal the deed, Bradley," I said, holding up the paper. "But you didn't do your homework. You didn't run a title search." I took another step. "I do not own this house. I never did." Bradley blinked, confusion warring with rage. "What Catherine put this house in an irrevocable trust 20 years ago," I said. "The beneficiary is a charity for victims of fraud. I just have a lifetime tenancy agreement. You cannot sell it. You cannot mortgage it. You cannot steal it. Even if I had signed that paper in blood, it would be worthless. You tried to rob a ghost." Bradley stared at me. The tire iron lowered an inch. The realization washed over him. The futility. The stupidity. He had committed murder, forgery, and kidnapping for an asset that was legally untouchable. He looked at the paper in my hand. Then he looked at Beatrice. "You knew," he whispered to her. She shook her head, sobbing. I didn't know." He pushed her away. He shoved her down the stairs. I caught her. We tumbled backward, landing on the stairs, but I held her tight, shielding her from the impact. Bradley raised the tire iron over his head, preparing to charge. "Drop him," the officer yelled. Bradley didn't drop. He took a step. Taser, two prongs hit him in the chest. The electricity seized his muscles. He went rigid. He fell forward, crashing onto the landing with the sound of a tree falling in the forest. The officers swarmed him. Cuffs clicked. Rights were read. I sat on the stairs holding my daughter while the police dragged the man who had ruined our lives out the front door. "It is okay, B," I whispered, stroking her hair. "It is okay. The ink is dry." The drive from the federal building to the suburbs usually took 40 minutes in light traffic, but with sirens wailing and a police escort clearing the lanes, we made it in 20. I sat in the back of the armored command vehicle, strapped into a jump seat across from Agent Miller. My ribs were throbbing, a dull, persistent ache that served as a metronome for my rising anxiety. I closed my eyes and tried to visualize the layout of my house. I tried to predict where Bradley would go. The master bedroom, the safe, the study. He was a creature of greed and violence, and when greed fails, violence is the only currency left. We turned onto Maple Street, and the world shifted into slow motion. The neighborhood was in lockdown. Blue and red lights reflected off the manicured lawns and the white siding of the colonial houses. Neighbors stood on their porches, clutching their robes, watching the spectacle with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. The black SUV was parked on my lawn, the driver's side door wide open. Skid marks tore through the hydrangeas Catherine had planted 3 years before she died. The front door of the house was kicked in, hanging off its hinges like a broken jaw. Miller spoke into his headset. "Perimeter set. We have movement on the second floor. Hostage situation confirmed." I unbuckled my seatbelt. "I need to go in, Miller." Miller looked at me. He saw the bruise forming on my jaw where I had hit the floor the night before. He saw the way I held my side. "You are a civilian, Gus. I cannot let you walk into a hot zone." "I am the only one he wants," I said. "If you send in the team now, he will panic. He will hurt her just to prove he can. Let me talk to him. Let me draw his fire." Miller hesitated. He looked at the tactical monitor. Thermal imaging showed 2 heat signatures in the upstairs hallway. One was huddled against the wall. The other was pacing frantically, holding something long and metallic. "He has a weapon," Miller said. "I know," I said. "It is a tire iron. I saw it in the trunk of his car last week. He keeps it next to the spare tire he does not know how to change." Miller sighed. He handed me a Kevlar vest. "Put this on. If he raises that weapon, we take the shot. Do not get in the line of fire." I strapped on the vest. It was heavy and smelled of sweat and gun oil. I stepped out of the truck. The air was thick with the static of radios and the hum of engines. I walked past the line of SWAT officers crouching behind their shields. They looked at me with confusion. Who was this old man walking into a siege with a cane and a cardigan? I walked up the driveway. I stepped over the ruined flowers. I walked through the broken door into the foyer of the house I had built my life in. The destruction was absolute. Bradley had not just come looking for me, he had come to erase me. The hallway was littered with debris. The family photos that had lined the walls were smashed, the glass crunching under my shoes. The antique mirror was shattered. Furniture was overturned. He had moved through the house like a tornado of impotent rage, looking for the man who had tricked him, looking for the money that had evaporated. I heard screaming from upstairs. It was Beatrice. "Please, Bradley, stop! He is not here!" "I do not know where he is, liar." Bradley's voice was a raw, shredding sound. "You helped him. You knew about the pen. You helped him switch it." I walked to the bottom of the stairs. I looked up. Bradley was standing at the top of the landing. He looked like a man who had stared into the abyss and found it empty. His suit was torn, his face purple with exertion. He was holding the tire iron, gripping it so hard his knuckles were white. Beatrice was cowering at his feet, her hands over her head, protecting herself from a blow that hadn't fallen yet. I tapped my cane against the wooden banister, a sharp, hollow sound that cut through his screaming. "I am right here, Bradley." He spun around. He saw me standing there, framed by the wreckage of the foyer. For a second, he looked confused, as if he couldn't process that the ghost he was hunting had just materialized. Then his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You," he whispered. I took a step up. "Let her go, Bradley. This is between you and me." He laughed. It was a jagged, broken sound. "Between us, there is no between us, Gus. There is just you ruining my life. You took everything." The bank laughed at me. They called security. I looked like a fool. "You are a fool," I said calmly, taking another step. "You thought you could steal a life you didn't earn. You thought you could walk in here and take 40 years of hard work just because you married my daughter." He grabbed Beatrice by the hair and yanked her up. She screamed a sound that tore at my heart. He pressed the tire iron against her cheek. "I still have this," he yelled. "I have the house, I have the girl. You think the police scare me? I have nothing left to lose. Gus, I will kill her. I swear to God, I will kill her, and then I will kill you." I stopped moving. I was halfway up the stairs. I could see the laser sights of the SWAT team dancing on the wall behind him. They were waiting for a clear shot. "You do not have the house, Bradley," I said, my voice steady and loud enough for him to hear over the pounding of his own heart. He blinked, sweat dripping into his eyes. "What, you do not own this house," I repeated. "You never did, even if that signature had been real, even if the ink hadn't faded. You couldn't have sold it. You couldn't have mortgaged it. You couldn't have done anything with it." He shook his head, trying to clear the fog of rage. "Shut up, I had the deed." It was a legal transfer. I reached into my pocket. Bradley flinched, tightening his grip on the tire iron. "Easy," I said. "Just a piece of paper." I pulled out a folded document. It was a copy of the trust agreement I had retrieved from my safe deposit box weeks ago. I unfolded it slowly, holding it up so he could see the seal. "Do you know what an irrevocable trust is, Bradley?" I asked. He stared at me blankly. He was a salesman, not a lawyer. He knew how to pitch, but he didn't know how to read the fine print. "It means the asset is locked," I explained. "Catherine and I put this house into a trust 20 years ago. The beneficiary is not me. It is not Beatrice. It is a charitable foundation for victims of financial fraud." I took another step up. "I am just a tenant, Bradley. I have a lifetime right of occupancy. I do not hold the title. I cannot sell it. I cannot give it away. And you certainly cannot steal it." Bradley's face went slack. The tire iron lowered an inch. "You lie," he whispered. "Beatrice said, she said it was yours." "Beatrice didn't know." I said, looking at my daughter. "I never told her. I wanted to protect her from exactly this. I knew that one day someone might try to take advantage of her kindness. I just didn't think it would be her husband." "You are lying," he screamed again, but the conviction was gone. The desperation was back. "Call the county clerk," I said. "Look up the title history. It is a matter of public record. You were so busy trying to forge a signature, you didn't even bother to do a basic title search. You committed kidnapping, forgery, assault, and attempted murder for a house that belongs to a charity." The realization hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, releasing Beatrice's hair. He looked at the walls around him. The walls he thought were his gold mine. They weren't gold. They were just drywall and paint. He had destroyed his life for nothing. He had chased a mirage over a cliff. He looked at me and his eyes were empty. The rage had burned out, leaving only the ashes of a ruined man. "You planned this," he said. "You knew. You let me do it." "I warned you," I said. "I told you I wasn't senile. I told you to stop. You didn't listen." He looked at the tire iron in his hand. He looked at Beatrice, who was sobbing quietly on the floor. Then he looked back at me. "I can still kill you," he whispered. He raised the weapon. He took a step toward me. "Drop it!" a voice boomed from the foyer. Bradley didn't drop it. He didn't care anymore. He swung the iron back, screaming a sound of pure primal defeat. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I watched him come. 2 loud pops echoed through the stairwell, not gunshots. The compressed air sound of Taser's deployment. 2 barbed probes hit Bradley in the chest. His body seized. The electricity overrode his nervous system, locking his muscles instantly. He went rigid like a board. The tire iron flew from his hand, clattering down the stairs to land at my feet. Bradley fell forward. He hit the landing hard, his face slamming into the floorboards he had tried to steal. He convulsed for 5 seconds, and then went still, groaning in the dust. The SWAT team swarmed past me. Boots thundered up the stairs. Men in black gear surrounded him, zip ties clicking, weapons trained on his back. Secure suspect in custody. I walked up the last few steps. I stepped over Bradley's prone form. I didn't look down at him. He was no longer my concern. He was just a statistic, a case file, a cautionary tale. I went to Beatrice. She was curled in a ball, shaking violently. I knelt down beside her. My knees cracked, but I didn't feel the pain. "B," I said softly. She looked up. Her eyes were wide with shock. "Dad," she whispered. "Is he?" "He is gone," I said. "It is over." She threw her arms around my neck, burying her face in my shoulder. She cried the kind of tears that have been held back for years, the tears of a person who has finally been allowed to feel the pain they have been denying. I held her. I rocked her back and forth amidst the ruins of our home. "I am sorry, Dad," she sobbed. "I am so sorry. I didn't know. I was so stupid." "You weren't stupid," I said, smoothing her hair. "You were in love, and he used that against you." I looked over her shoulder. 2 officers were hauling Bradley to his feet. He was limp, dazed. He looked at us as they dragged him toward the stairs. His eyes met mine. "You old bastard," he slurred. I didn't say anything. I just watched him go. I watched him disappear down the stairs, out the door, and out of our lives. An officer approached us. He lowered his rifle. "Sir, ma'am, are you injured? Do you need a medic?" I looked at Beatrice. She had bruises on her arms. Her lip was bleeding. "Check her," I said. "I am fine." I stood up, leaning on my cane. I walked to the railing and looked down into the foyer. Sullivan was standing there talking to Agent Miller. He looked up and gave me a curt nod, the nod of a job done. The house was a wreck. The walls were scarred, the furniture broken, the floor covered in glass and debris. It would take months to fix. It would take money I had earmarked for travel. But as I looked around, I didn't see the damage. I saw the space, the empty space where Bradley used to be. The silence where his shouting used to be. The air in the house felt different, lighter, cleaner. I walked back to Beatrice. The medic was checking her pupils. "Dad," she said, taking my hand. "The house. The trust. Is it true? Do we really not own it?" I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had smiled in weeks. "I lied, B." She blinked. "What? There is no trust," I said. "I own the house free and clear. I always have. I just needed him to believe he had lost everything before the handcuffs went on. I needed him to know that he was never even close." Beatrice stared at me. Then she started to laugh. It was a shaky, wet laugh, but it was real. "You are terrible," she said. "I know," I said, squeezing her hand. "But I am still here, and so are you." We sat there on the landing of our broken house, listening to the sirens fade into the distance. The nightmare was over. The sun was coming up through the shattered fanlight window above the door, casting long beams of dust-filled light across the floor. It was going to be a long day. There would be statements to give and insurance adjusters to call, and a lot of cleaning up to do. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about the future. I had my daughter back. I had my house back. And I had a bottle of very expensive scotch downstairs that Bradley hadn't managed to finish. I thought I might go pour myself a glass. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting tight is distinct, mechanical, and final. It cuts through the sobbing and the shouting like a period at the end of a long, incoherent sentence. I stood at the top of the stairs watching two federal agents haul Bradley Thorne to his feet. He was not the swaggering developer anymore. He was not the tough guy with the tire iron. He was a deflated balloon, a man whose entire existence had been punctured by the sharp point of reality. He was screaming, but the words were losing their shape. He was babbling about lawyers, about rights, about how this was all a misunderstanding. He looked up at me as they dragged him toward the door. His eyes were wide, filled with a panic that was almost childlike. He wanted me to fix it. Even after trying to kill me, even after stealing from me, he still looked at me with that ingrained expectation that I was the safety net. He expected the old man to step in and smooth things over because that is what I had always done. I had paid the bills. I had fixed the leaks. I had buried the mistakes. But the safety net was gone. I had cut the ropes myself. "You cannot do this, Gus," he shouted, his voice cracking as they pushed him through the broken doorframe. "I am family. You cannot send family to prison." I did not say a word. I just watched. I watched as they shoved him into the back of the armored vehicle. I watched as the heavy door slammed shut, sealing him inside a metal box that would be his home for the next 20 years. I watched until the convoy pulled away, leaving only tire tracks on my lawn and silence in my foyer. Then I turned my attention to the wreckage that remained. Beatrice was still on the floor. She was on her knees amidst the shattered glass of the mirror, her hands covering her face. She was weeping, a low, keening sound of absolute misery. It was the sound of a woman mourning a life that had never really existed. I walked down the stairs. My legs felt heavy. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain in my ribs was returning with a vengeance. I stopped a few feet away from her. I did not kneel down. I did not reach out to touch her shoulder. I stood tall, leaning on my cane, waiting for her to look at me. She lowered her hands. Her face was swollen, her makeup streaked. She looked at the empty doorway, where her husband had just disappeared. Then she looked up at me. She shuffled forward on her knees, reaching for my hand. "Dad," she sobbed. "Oh God, Dad. I am so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was going to hurt you. I was scared." I looked down at her. I looked at my daughter, the child I had carried on my shoulders, the girl I had taught to drive the woman I had walked down the aisle. And I felt a terrible, cold clarity. "I know you were scared, Beatrice," I said, my voice flat. "But fear is not an excuse. Fear is a choice. You chose to be afraid of the truth because the lie was more comfortable. You chose to let him rob me because you didn't want to lose your lifestyle. You chose to stand by while he threatened my life because you didn't want to be alone." She flinched as if I had slapped her. "Dad, please. Do not say that. I love you. We can fix this. He is gone now. It is just us. We can go back to how it was." I shook my head slowly. "No, Beatrice. We cannot. Because how it was is exactly what led us here." I reached into the inside pocket of my cardigan. I pulled out a thick white envelope. I had prepared it 3 days ago, sitting in the hotel room, while I watched Bradley launder money on my laptop. I had known this moment would come. I had known that saving her life would mean breaking her heart. I dropped the envelope on the floor in front of her. It landed with a soft thud on the dusty carpet. "What is this?" she asked, looking at it through her tears. It is a severance package, I said. She stared at me confused. Inside that envelope is a cashier check for $25,000, I explained. It is enough to rent an apartment, buy some furniture, and get a used car. There is also a one-way plane ticket to Phoenix, Arizona. The flight leaves at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Phoenix, she whispered. Why Phoenix? Because it is 1,500 miles away from Chicago, I said. Because nobody knows you there. Because Bradley does not have any contacts there. And because I am not there. She scrambled up to her feet, ignoring the pain in her bruised legs. She tried to grab my arm, but I stepped back. Dad, you are kicking me out. After everything that just happened, you are sending me away. I am saving you. Beatrice, I said, my voice rising for the first time. If you stay here, you will spend the next 5 years visiting him in prison. You will let him manipulate you from behind bars. You will sell your jewelry to pay for his appeals. You will wait for him because you are addicted to him. You are addicted to being the victim. No, I won't, she cried. I hate him. He held a tire iron to my head. Today you hate him, I said. But next week, when the shock wears off, when he calls you crying and telling you he is sorry, you will forgive him. You always forgive him, just like you expect me to forgive you right now. She stopped crying. She looked at me with a mixture of shock and anger. She had never heard me speak like this. She had never seen the forensic accountant, the man who dismantled lives for a living. She had only ever seen the soft father. I am your daughter, she whispered. You are supposed to take care of me. I did take care of you, I said. I took care of you for 32 years. I paid for your college. I paid for your wedding. I let you live in my house. I let your husband treat me like a servant because I thought it would make you happy. And look where it got us. I gestured around the ruined foyer. This is what happens when you cushion someone from reality, Beatrice. They never learn to walk because they never have to fall. Well, today you fell, and I am not picking you up. I am pointing you toward the door. She looked at the envelope on the floor. Then she looked at the stairs leading up to her old bedroom, the room where she had hidden while I fought for our lives. I have nowhere to go, she said, her voice small. You have Phoenix, I said. You have a degree you haven't used in 6 years. You have $25,000. That is more than most people start with. I walked over to the front door. It was broken, hanging off one hinge, but I pulled it open as far as it would go. The morning sun streamed in blindingly bright against the wreckage of the hallway. A black sedan was idling at the curb. It wasn't a police car. It was a private car I had hired. That car is waiting for you, I said. The driver knows the way to the airport. Your bags are already packed. I packed them while you were sleeping yesterday morning because I knew today would end one of 2 ways. Either I would be dead or you would be leaving. Beatrice looked at the car. She looked at the house. She looked at me. She was waiting for the reprieve. She was waiting for me to crack, to open my arms and say I didn't mean it. She was waiting for the Hollywood ending where the family hugs in the rubble and promises to do better. But life is not a movie. Life is a balance sheet. And Beatrice was a liability I could no longer afford to carry. Pick up the envelope, Beatrice. Oh, I said, my voice gentle but final. She bent down. Her fingers trembled as she touched the paper. She picked it up. She held it to her chest. She walked toward me. She stopped in the doorway. She looked older than she had an hour ago. The illusion of the pampered princess was gone, replaced by the terrified face of a woman who was finally facing the world without a shield. Will I ever see you again? She asked, tears spilling over her lashes. I don't know, I said honestly. That depends on you. If you get on that plane, if you get a job, if you build a life that is actually yours, then maybe. But if you stay here, if you try to contact Bradley, if you try to come back to this house before you are standing on your own 2 feet, the door will be locked. She nodded slowly. She understood. It was harsh. It was cruel. But it was the only way she was ever going to survive. "Goodbye, Dad," she whispered. "Goodbye, Beatrice." She walked out onto the porch. She walked down the steps, past the ruined hydrangeas, past the tire tracks on the lawn. She got into the black sedan. She didn't look back. The car pulled away, disappearing down the street that was slowly returning to its suburban quiet. I stood in the doorway for a long time. The house was silent. The only sound was the wind blowing through the broken door and the settling of the dust. I was alone. For the first time in 2 weeks, I was completely alone. There was no Bradley barking orders. There was no Beatrice crying in the next room. There were no police, no lawyers, no threats. I turned around and looked at the foyer. It was a disaster. There was blood on the floor. There were holes in the drywall. My wife's antique mirror was a pile of silver shards. It should have been depressing. It should have been a scene of tragedy. But as I took a deep breath, I realized something strange. The air tasted sweet. It didn't smell of fear anymore. It smelled of freedom. I walked into the living room. I stepped over an overturned chair. I made my way to the liquor cabinet which Bradley had raided, but not emptied. I found the bottle of 30-year-old scotch he had opened for his party. It was sitting on the mantel next to the empty spot where he had smashed a vase. I found a glass that wasn't broken. I poured myself 2 fingers. My hands were steady. The tremors were gone. The act was over. I raised the glass to the empty room, to the ghost of Catherine who would have probably killed Bradley herself if she were here, to Sullivan who had backed my play, and to Harvey Dent, the signature that saved my life. I took a sip. It burned going down a clean, warming fire that settled in my stomach. My ribs ached. My house was a wreck. My family was destroyed. But I was standing in my own living room. I was drinking my own scotch. And for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. I sat down in my favorite leather armchair, the one Bradley had tried to throw out. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I would fix the door tomorrow. I would hire contractors to repair the walls next week. I would testify at the trial in 6 months. But for today, I was just going to sit here. I was going to rest. I had fought the war. I had dropped the bomb. And I was the last man standing. The silence that fills a house after a SWAT team leaves is heavy and thick like a wool blanket. It is a silence composed of settling dust and echoing memories. I walked through the hallway, stepping over the shards of the vase that had been a wedding gift from my late wife grandmother. I would have to call a cleaning crew tomorrow. I would have to call a contractor to fix the doorframe and a glazier to replace the fanlight. There was a lot of work to do. But for the first time in months, the work felt like maintenance, not defense. It was my mess to clean up. I walked into my study, the room where I had barricaded myself, the room where I had launched the counterattack that destroyed my son-in-law. The bookshelf was still pushed away from the wall where I had moved it to block the door. I pushed it back into place. The physical exertion made my ribs ache, a sharp reminder of the kick that had started the endgame. I sat down in my leather chair. It groaned under my weight, a familiar welcoming sound. I looked up at the oil painting of Catherine that hung above the fireplace. She was smiling that enigmatic smile she always had when she knew a secret I hadn't figured out yet. I smiled back at her. "You would have hated him, Katie," I whispered. "You would have chased him out with a broom the first time he looked at you sideways." I reached for the remote control on my desk and pressed a hidden button under the ledge. There was a soft click, and the painting swung outward on silent hinges, revealing the wall safe behind it. This was the real safe. Not the decoy safe in the master bedroom that I let Bradley find. Weeks ago, the one containing expired passports and a few $100s in cash. This was the safe where I kept the things that mattered. I spun the dial. Left, right, left. The tumblers clicked into place. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside there were stacks of cash emergency funds from my days in the field. There were backup hard drives. There was my badge. But I didn't reach for any of those. I reached for a glossy navy blue folder lying on top of the stack. I pulled it out and set it on the desk. I opened it, smoothing the heavy cardstock pages. The brochure was for the Meridian at Lake Geneva. It was not a nursing home. It was a luxury retirement community. It had a golf course, a heated swimming pool, a 5-star restaurant, and private cottages with lake views. It cost $10,000 a month, and there was a 3-year waiting list. I turned the page to the acceptance letter. It was dated 6 months ago. Dear Mr. Wainwright, we are pleased to inform you that a cottage has become available. I had signed the contract. I had paid the deposit. I had a move-in date scheduled for next month. I leaned back in my chair and laughed. It was a dry, dusty laugh that turned into a cough, but it felt good. It felt like releasing a breath I had been holding for a year. The irony was perfect. It was almost Shakespearean. Bradley Thorne had destroyed his life to force me into a nursing home. He had committed fraud, kidnapping, and assault to get me out of this house. He had screamed and threatened and forged documents to steal a property I was already planning to leave. If he had just been decent. If he had just been patient. If he had treated me with an ounce of respect, I would have given him the keys. I had planned to gift the house to Beatrice and him. I wanted to downsize. I wanted to play golf and drink scotch by the lake. I wanted to spend my golden years traveling, not fighting a turf war in my own kitchen. I was tired of the stairs. I was tired of the maintenance. I was ready to go. But greed is a blinder. Greed makes you see enemies where there are benefactors. Bradley saw an old man in the way. He didn't see the man who was wrapping a gift. Because he tried to take it by force, he lost it all. And because he forced me to fight, I had to stay. I had to cancel the contract with the Meridian last week, when I realized the extent of his crimes. I couldn't leave Beatrice alone with a predator. I looked at the brochure one last time. The blue water of the lake looked inviting. Maybe next year. Maybe after the trial. Maybe when Beatrice was settled in Arizona and I knew she was safe, I would reapply. But for now, I was the king of my castle again. I closed the safe and swung the painting back into place. I stood up and walked over to the side table. There, sitting in a crystal decanter, was the bottle of Chateau Lafite Rothschild that Bradley had brought to the party last night. He had boasted about it to the investors, claiming it cost $1,000. He had probably charged it to one of the credit cards he took out in my name before I froze them. I picked up the bottle. It was heavy, cold glass. He never got to open it. He was too busy panicking about Henderson leaving. I took a corkscrew from the drawer. I drove it into the cork and pulled. The pop was satisfyingly loud in the quiet room. I didn't bother with a wine glass. I grabbed the tumbler I used for my water. I poured a generous amount of the dark red liquid. I swirled it around, watching the legs run down the side of the glass. I walked to the window. The street was empty. The police barricades were gone. The neighbors had gone back inside to gossip and speculate. The sun was fully up now, bathing the street in a harsh morning light that exposed every flaw in the pavement. I took a sip of the wine. It was excellent. Complex oaky with a hint of berries. It tasted expensive. It tasted like victory. I looked at my reflection in the window glass. I looked old. My face was bruised, my hair was messy, my cardigan was stained with dust. I looked like a victim, but I knew the truth. I raised the glass to my reflection. To you, Bradley, I whispered. Thank you. Thank you for showing me that I still have teeth. Thank you for showing Beatrice that she is stronger than she thinks. And thank you for the house. Because of your greed, I didn't give it away. Because of your stupidity, I kept my assets. And because of your arrogance, I am standing here drinking your wine in my study, while you sit in a holding cell eating a bologna sandwich. I took another sip. I thought about the future. It would be lonely for a while. The house was too big for one man, but it was safe. It was mine. I would have to testify. I would have to see him in court. I would have to watch him plead and cry and blame everyone but himself. But I wasn't worried. I had the evidence. I had the truth. And I had Harvey Dent. I chuckled again. The disappearing ink. The simplest trick in the book. A $3 pen that defeated a $1 million fraud. It was poetic. I finished the wine. I set the glass down on the desk, right next to the gouge mark from the knife. I would leave that mark there. I wouldn't sand it out. I would leave it as a reminder, a scar to prove that the battle happened and that I survived. I walked out of the study and down the hall to my bedroom. I was exhausted. My body felt like it was made of lead. I needed to sleep for a week. But before I slept, I had one more thing to do. I picked up the framed photo of Catherine from my nightstand. "We got him, Katie," I said softly. "We got the bastard." I placed the photo back down. I lay down on the bed. My bed. Not the cot. The master bed. I pulled the duvet up to my chin. It smelled of lavender and dust. I closed my eyes. The house was quiet. The war was over, and for the first time in a long time I slept without a weapon under my pillow. They say that blood is thicker than water, but I have learned that respect is the only currency that truly holds value in a family. Bradley thought my age made me vulnerable, but he forgot that getting old is a privilege denied to many. A privilege earned through survival, patience, and the accumulation of wisdom. You cannot save people who fall in love with their own chains, and you cannot buy loyalty from those who only see you as a bank account. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not holding on, but knowing exactly when to lock the door. If you believe that justice is a dish best served cold, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of truth and consequences.